Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Hruday, the HR cell of SGA Manavevs Mumbai, it is my pleasure to welcome you all to Paragna 2025, our business Pandia. This year's theme, Building Talent Pipelines for Entrepreneurial Generation, HR Strategies for Future Founders, explores how India can prepare for the next wave of leaders who will shape the country's evolving business landscape. As organizations respond to changing technologies, new funding models, and a growing entrepreneurial mindset among the youth, the need to build agile, resilient, and future-ready workforce has never been greater. The discussion today aims to uncover how HR can play a transformative role in nurturing not just employees, but future founders and entrepreneurs, individuals who drive innovation from within and beyond traditional organizational boundaries. We are honored to welcome our speaker for today, Ms. Bhavya Mishra, Chief Human Resource Officer at Godrej Capital. Ms. Mishra brings with her nearly 2 decades of rich experience in their HR functions across sectors such as technology, FMCG, and retail. Her distinguished career includes leadership roles at PepsiCo, Bharti Walmart, and Lenovo, where she excelled in talent management, talent acquisition, organizational transformation, and business partnership. At Godrej Capital, Ms. Mishra resonates deeply with the company's causes related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, with a particular focus on the LGBTQIA+ and PWD communities. She also leads the company's vision to create a workplace of gender inclusion, striving for equal representation of men and women. Her approach to HR is deeply rooted in empathy and pragmatism, ensuring that every employee feels valued and heard. She believes in keeping employees at a safe, healthy, and empowering work environment. Her strategic alignment of business codes with talent practices has been central to her HR philosophy. An alumna of NDA Gorgon and St. Stephen's College, Delhi, Ms. Mishra brings a wealth of knowledge and a proven track record of driving HR excellence. Her dedication to building a diverse and dynamic workforce continues to propel Godrej Capital towards greater success. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to Ms. Bhavya Mishra and Ms. Arpita Patnaik, a corporate HR and admin at Godrej Capital, to Paragna 2025. We are truly delighted to have her with us today and look forward to gaining valuable insights from her experiences and perspective. Welcome.
Thank you. Okay, so the problem of starting like this with so many things about your career, what you've done, and they are, as you will learn, they are generally a lot bigger than how you look at them, is that then you have to live up to all of that in the session. And the session should also be value added, in comparison to everything that you heard. So, yeah, guys, first of all, I feel the way this topic reads is so complicated. I think the slides are going to be simpler than what our friend told you as an introduction. So I really believe in keeping things really simple and breaking up whatever complexity. So I think just as a principle, my personal belief is that the simpler it is, actually more effort will gone into it than doing a very difficult thing, right? So we try to keep it really simple, and I would suggest that think about topics and think about concepts at the core. Why are we saying something is different? Why is something similar, etc.? So I think when I was thinking through this topic, which is building talent pipelines for the entrepreneurial generation, a lot of heavy words there. I think good to break it down as we go along. Can I have a kicker? How do we move the slides? Or should I say? Yeah, you can push the presentation, and how do we move the slides? You're okay, good?
I'll check for that.
Okay. Otherwise, it's there, right? Yeah, okay. It's there. Okay, so let's jump in. I think before we start with the topic itself, just a bit of background, because I will give you some examples of Godrej Capital, which is where I lead HR. So just some understanding of what is Godrej Capital, what do we do. You're obviously sitting in the middle of the financial hub of the country, so you understand capital as a business. But still, I mean, for some of us who may need clarification, I'll give you a bit of detailing on what do we do at Godrej Capital, right? So Godrej Industries, Godrej itself, right, is a household name. All of us know it's a 127-year-old company, right? And I think there itself lies a lesson in entrepreneurship, which says that somebody can start a company which can last and outlive them for so many generations and still be thriving, right? So Godrej is a great example. It was born, in the Swadeshi movement, and you can go online and read about it. There's an Amar Chitra Katha book specifically on our founder, right? So Godrej, we are part of the Godrej Industries group. And Godrej Capital, actually, the contrast is, right? Why Godrej itself is 127 years old. Godrej Capital itself is an entrepreneurial venture in a way, which means that we're just 5 years old. So the company itself, in fact, coincidentally, this weekend, the coming weekend, we're celebrating GC at Pioneer. We call it Godrej Capital eternally GC. And it's just a 5-year-old company. So then you have the contrast, a group which has products, which has businesses which have lived for all of those 100+ years. And this is another business which has just started about 5 years back. Right? Now, what does Capital exactly do? Capital, as a part of this group, is into the business of lending. Okay? And we have 2 companies within Godrej Capital. One of them is a housing finance company, which means that if you were to go out and want to take a loan, your parents might want to take a loan, we would be able to lend to you, right? We would be able to give you a loan for buying the house. And that means across different segments. It could be in the affordable segment, somebody who's buying the house for, let's say, 30 lakhs, wants to take a loan for 15 lakhs. We could do that. If somebody's in the premium segment, you're buying, a house in Bombay, maybe for 2 crores, we could give you a loan for that as well. Right? So Godrej Housing Finance lends for housing purposes largely. Then we have an NBFC. With the NBFC, our focus is on lending to the Indian MSMEs, small and medium enterprises. So a lot of the products on that side of the business, which is the NBFC, Godrej Finance, where the products talk to the SME. So there are business loans, loans against property, business loans against property. We also are going to start a bit of retail lending, but the large corporates will continue to be the MSMEs, right? So that's just a big background of Godrej Capital. Like I said, I will take some examples from our own company. Like I said, started 5 years back, so you can pretty much say with zero, which means that from an employee count, and sort of us come from HR, we had 0 employees 5-6 years back, right? And then there are a lot of statutory processes on getting a license. This is a highly regulated sector, right? So the first year sort of went in all of that. And then we had about 360 employees in FY 21-22. That's calendar year, largely calendar year 21, right? And then today, as we stand today, we have about 2,000 employees. So that's just happened in the last 5 years. I myself have been a part of this organization over the last 1.5 years or so. Prior to that, it was somebody else, right? We are present in 68 cities. We have 80 offices. And I heard in the beginning he was talking about diversity. And I want to come back to that and just, lay a little bit of emphasis on there are forms of diversity which are really obvious, right? Like when we look around this room, men, women, right, LGBTQIA, persons with disability, etc. I think for Godrej Capital, actually largely for Godrej, but for now I speak for Godrej Capital, our belief is in inclusivity, which means that how do we get different types of people and get them to be successful together? Right now, again, that sounds like a very motherhood, fluffy statement, get different types of people. How do you break it down, right? So one easy way of breaking down is saying men, women. Then nowadays we say it's not just men, women. We've become more educated. We've become, I won't say more sensitive, and we say there are others. So the whole category of LGBTQIA+, right? Then we say people come with different abilities and hence person with disabilities. But fundamentally through all of that, right, those are just ways of saying how do we say that we are diverse? Because if it's just even if it were a group of just women sitting here, then it would be very difficult to say that we are inclusive. Who are we including? We are all looking like each other, right? So in that journey of saying that are we inclusive or not, one of the things we've continued to track at the beginning is also been that are we hiring from different kinds of companies and not just picking everybody from one type of company saying ki acha okay, this is a product that I'm creating, let me get everybody, because it's very easy actually, right? I mean, if you're a new business, the most tempting thing to do is and lending is not really a very creative, very different space. It's a business which is well established. We must be player number 35 entering this business, right? So the easiest talent strategy always is to go out there and say, ki, "Theek hai yaar, I mean, there are 20 other players who are doing great at what they're doing. We're also going to be in the whereabouts of what they are doing. Why don't we hire from them?" And which is why that number we're very proud of, which is to say that to form this, group of 2,000 employees, we've gone out and recruited from 595 organizations, right? And like all mathematical things, there will be a peak, there will be a few organizations which will have a loss score, there will be a tail, etc. But I think it just goes to say that you do have a set of different kinds of individuals working together. And hence on diversity, the stand is basically that, to say that can we get different types of people who work in different kinds of companies, people who look different, people with different abilities, people with different genders, can they come and work here and be successful? Right? And the last point is mentioned, move from a pace of growth, right? In the last 6 months, we've hired about close to 900 people. It just keeps growing. So the number that's mentioned is about a week back. So that's where we are as an organization. Now, zooming into your topic, and I'll sort of intersperse both the things, right? Which is the topic that we want to discuss today and where GC is and some examples from there. Now, talking about the entrepreneurial generation, again, like I said, if we simply break it up into saying what does it mean, and all of these words, is it really different from what it was before? Because there were millennials and all of the terminologies that we have ultimately are continuing. What is changing, right? Why are we looking at it as a different generation? And there could be many more things, but here are 4 things that we've listed. I'm sure it is not exhaustive. There could be more differences, there could be nuances, but here is a start, right? The first one is that we're saying, why are we calling them entrepreneurial itself? And not many of you are more representative than I am, so you could attest to it or otherwise. I think a lot of times when we studying people who are younger, including I have a 7-year-old daughter, including her, right? If I look at her, there is a lot of value placed on purpose. Why are we doing things? The meaning of things. A lot of value placed on autonomy, innovation, rather than just traditional. And it's been a continuum. I don't think that is a sudden change where the generation has stood up and said, okay, I want to do my own thing. I think, from my parents' generation where they did, one specific job for their whole careers, to our generation where a lot more job hopping, experimentation happened, to where we've reached today, which is that, we pushed it in the other direction saying, why can't I do my own thing, own it, get to different places, etc. So I think that is a key difference, which as HR folks, we need to think about, also design for. Shift to portfolio careers or, different kinds of assignments. I don't think when we're looking at careers, specifically, like I said, you are more representative of it. I don't think people are looking at careers for the old duration, saying that I'm going to do this till I'm 60. In fact, to be very honest, even in my own generation, as I talk to people, most people don't have a working plan of what they're going to do post 45, 50. They don't want to keep working till 60 itself. And obviously, in your generation, is moved to a completely different level, right? And hence, as organizations, we need to find ways. I mean, most of the times in organization, we are talking about sustainability of practices. Our practice is going to live over a period of time. Are you able to scale them? Do these practices, do they lend themselves to different situations over a period of time? Will I have the same system? Now, that's how company is thinking. But if the person coming in is thinking very differently, then obviously, there is some sort of a mismatch, and organizations will need to adapt. That's the starting premise. And so just going back, to the whole construct of saying then hence, why should HR look at talent pipelines? Now, from a career perspective, right, and the first point talks to a bit of that, right? I have grown up in an FMCG company, right? And even today, I would say there is some level of merit to talking about careers as linear path. FMCGs have talked about it for generations, saying that, first you go become an ASM, then after that you become, a larger territory, or let's say you start from rural and you're going to go to an urban city, then after that you become a state head, etc. By that time, if you're an MBA, then you start saying, I want to do marketing, then you will grow in marketing, strategy, etc. If, you want to continue with sales, regional, national, and the whole path, right? That's been the way in which we've looked at careers, and sales is just one example that I've taken, but pretty much across, right? Even if we look at our own careers, HR, I remember at the beginning of my career having a discussion, it's a very typical career path saying first you do plant, then you do sales, then after that that's how you grow, right? You do a COE role, then you do a larger people management role, blah, blah, blah. But I think some of what is happening around us, we're also re-looking at how do we design these career paths, because most people are not actually in fact following these paths. And from a company perspective, what's happening is that when we're looking at the top jobs, when we're looking at senior jobs, you're not finding people who've done all those experiences. Because in our mind, we're saying that, okay, if a person wants to become, let's say, a CHRO, then she should have had these 5 experiences, right? Many times what's happening is that the person doesn't have those set of experiences. And it doesn't make the person less qualified to do the job. It doesn't make them less capable to do the job. But they're still turning up saying that they can do the job with the same potential, with the same capability, but with a different set of experiences. So clearly those linear paths where we said this is a rite of passage, you have to do these 5 things, etc., is getting questioned, and hence from a design perspective also needs to change. The other one that I will talk about is the third one there, which is entrepreneurial mindsets. I think just within the organization, many times we fall into the trap of only trying to prioritize efficiency, saying how we make this process better, can we get in technology? So things which are a lot more incremental. I think there's not enough time spent looking at, disproportionate changes or looking at completely disruptive changes within the organizations. So if there's a space that we can create to be able to do that, where employees themselves have that space, right, to think differently, to contribute to the organization, not just incrementally improving the processes, but disrupting, thinking differently, etc., there might be something interesting there that we could explore. So we move on to another example of Godrej Capital. So Idea RAM is, actually this was last year's. So this year we'll have the 4th season. We've run it for 3 seasons and now it's going to be the 4th one. Again, Ideogram is an internal platform and it says Spark Tank Edition, which is a very bad day for Shark Tank, but we'll live with that. So, what we said was that people across the company, right? And again, I mean, we started from pretty much zero, right? To where we are. We are now at around 20,000 crores of AUM. We are fairly profitable. So, the last 5-year journey has been pretty good. But what we've said is that while the initial starting team, I'm going back to that 1GC, right? Which is a small team. Most of the people know each other. There's an opportunity to contribute across different functions. There's an opportunity to give your opinion. You can contribute to the company at a larger scale than your job alone, right? That's the fundamental that happens right at the beginning of the company when you have a few people. But as we've grown, we realized that space becomes more and more difficult to make real because your distance, like I said, we're at 68 cities, 80 different offices, people are sitting, coming, which is where we thought about this platform, which is called Ideogram, in terms of saying that every year can be defined some key challenges that we need to work on as an organization and invite ideas from across the hierarchy to come together and contribute. And it is obviously not what you anyway do in your job because you're anyway expected to do that, right? And that brings in a lot of ideas which are incremental, which are process of efficiencies, which make things better, which I think is great, right? But it also sometimes throws up some things which are completely different, right? Where we would not have thought of that idea at our end. As some employees who've got a different exposure, different lens to look at the business would come back and share it. So the management committee, which is the leadership team, then evaluates these ideas and we see what is implementable, etc. So I think that's worked for well for us again in this phase of the business. Moving on, just in terms of what are some of the things more concretely that we can look at in terms of building future ready talent pipelines? Uh, I think the first one has been talked about. Campuses have done this a lot better, I would say, than corporates, which is all of these incubation labs in terms of being able to support entrepreneurial ideas. Ideagram is one example of that, but I do think that business school campuses, actually many times technology campuses, etc., are not really well in that, but we can do a lot more in that space. Reverse mentoring is again another thing at GC itself I have experienced works really well. And I'll give you a simple example. Actually, we have a board member and he's an absolute technology veteran, had been a CTO across different companies, very, very senior actually. And then recently through conversation, he was saying that as he's on the boards of different companies, one of the things that he wants to know more about, right, is this whole space of LGBTQIA individuals. And as much as we, it's a lot in vogue, we talk a lot about it, I think many a times we don't have full information. And many a times if we start working, because at Voltage Capital, we have many folks from the community, from the queer community. What happens is our learning has been that there is a lot of awkwardness sometimes, that you don't exactly know what to say, what might overstep, right? Even if you're being really sensitive. And that's when he said that, is there something we can do? Can there be a sense fair? So that's where we started his journey on reverse mentoring. One of the members of my team, she's a trans woman. And I requested her, why don't you mentor him on this specific topic? Talk to him about what it means, what's this phase like, what's okay, what's not okay, right? And this is just one topic, and it's obviously not a core business topic, but equally on business topics, and more specifically topics where the younger generations have far more ease, expertise, where they are natives like technology, etc., are excellent topics for reverse mentoring. And again, I think across organizations, we haven't done justice to it. I think sometimes because of hierarchies, ways of working, it becomes difficult, but it's an excellent thing to look at. Mentoring, of course, is well known, and there are many ways of doing it. Flexible career architectures I did talk about. I do think that, we're in the stage of still discovering this. Like I said, people with long gaps, sabbaticals, alternate choices that they've made, in their career. Then husband actually started his career with sales, then went on to do analytics, data analytics, and then now runs a not-for-profit, right? And I don't know, maybe after 5 years, he'll want to work in the corporate. So I don't know how a CV of a person like that can actually be read, evaluated. How will you pay a person like that? I think career paths are looking far different with respect to the choices that people are making. In between, people have entrepreneurial stints and they want to come back to the corporate. And many times, I think in things which are very, very, I would say basic, we get stuck in terms of saying, how do we evaluate the compensation of a person? Because the way we look at these things always is, what was the person getting? Let me see what's the hike, and you do a simple calculation. But that's not how you can evaluate experiences which are very different from a traditional corporate experience. Right. So I think some of that learning we need to do, and as a function, we need to sort of work towards. Last, but definitely not the least, I think most organizations are realizing this, and I do feel on this there is some movement, which is that clearly this generation has a lot of ask for meaning. What is the connection of my work with, the larger stuff? How do I do something which also adds to purpose? What is the purpose of the company itself? And across, I would say from a data standpoint, across engagement surveys, conversations, even one-on-ones, etc., this comes out a lot. So I think, how do we link core purposes to your work, either integrated into work or provide as a side experience? Both of those are becoming very critical and something for us to think about and to work on. So this is another Voltage Capital example, Arohi. And I'm personally very passionate about Arohi, and I'll talk to you a little about what it is, right? So, right from when we started, right, we said that, like I was telling you earlier, that we want to be an inclusive company, right? And if you look at genders, then men, women obviously is the most obvious way of saying that, can I get more women? And I think somewhere last year, similar night, the question we were asking ourselves was, okay, we're whatever, 1,200, 1,500 people. In very soon, we'll become 5,000 people. So suppose, in an ideal world, you'll say that let's make it 50-50. Right? That's how it should be intuitively. There are 50% men in the world, 50% women. It never happens. There are most companies in a field situation would not have. But let's say the ideal world played out. We had that, right? So we would be able to positively impact 2,500 women, let's say on a base of 5,000, let's say. But then we said, is that enough? We are a financial institution. What are we talking about? This cannot be our only impact, right? That we can hire 2,500 more women. And if we look at it, the kind of people that we end up hiring, right? Poor us are here. It's not like Godrej Capital is the only place we can work. Those women are also women who would find jobs elsewhere, right? So you're not really doing something which is totally different. Yes, it would be more difficult to do it, etc. There would be a journey, so the effort is appreciated. But having said that, that's not good enough impact. Which is where we said that if you're a financial firm, why don't we look at our customers? Because we reach out to far more customers that people may hire, right? And in the customer segment itself, are we lending to women? So, like I was telling you earlier, we have an NBFC, we have an HFC, right? The HFC has several products, the NBFC has various products. In each of those products, what is our pipeline of lending to women? Are we actually lending to women business owners? There's all this conversation about so many women are now owning businesses, SMEs are growing, right? If you go to Instagram, there'll be so many women-led businesses, etc., etc. But are we being able to lend them? Are these women in the main, structure of Indian lending, right? And as we started thinking a bit about that, we realized that the answer is obviously more. The proportion of women that you're lending to, housing is different, right? Housing, there are a lot more women borrowers. But on the side of, the NBFC, where we have business loans, like I said, loans against property, etc., very few businesses, women-owned businesses we were letting do. And we realized, we studied the pipeline. Are we rejecting more women, etc.? Our understanding of that was that the pipeline, the start of the funnel itself, there aren't that many applications. It's not like we're rejecting more women than men. Probably the pass rates through the funnel are the same, but the starting point itself is different, right? Which is where, we started Arohi as a concept in terms of saying that every product that we have, can we have a variation of that where we look at women as a borrower base? Not just, like I said, from a hiring perspective, then hiring could make much more sense that you are selling to women, so you can hire more women to also sell to them. But let's start with women as a borrower base, and what do we do? So with each of the products, we've tweaked policies. We've said, okay, how do we get them into the formal lending structure? So in fact, as we speak, we've just done about 1,000 crores of ROE loans across products. And I think that personally has been a great win for us as an organization. Alongside that, in the FS sector, you work with channel partners. That's how business happens. You don't normally go to customers directly. We said, can we get more and more channel partners enrolled home in it? Right. So these women can then also connect with women business owners, etc. Then that value chain happens and it's much better. Like I was telling you earlier, we've become profitable. We've also said that a large part of what we're going to spend as a part of our CSR responsibility should go towards women. Right? That's how you make the agenda itself strategic. And most of the people, I think the good thing about this whole Arohi thing is that most of the people who are working on it are working on it alongside their day jobs. I think maybe one person's core job is Arohi itself, who looks at just studying different products and what's happening, are we not. Other than that, people who are within their products or in different functions are coming together to make it happen. So tying it back to the last slide in terms of saying that, how do we give people who are passionate about a certain topic, irrespective of their core roles, job roles, also an opportunity to contribute to things that they find purpose-driven, right? I think more such opportunities and platforms we need to create. This is just one such example from GC. The other one, again, from a careers standpoint, this is actually very recent. This is just this year. I think till now we weren't that big at GC. we were, just about 4 years, the oldest employee in the company would be 4-5 years, right? So, careers wasn't that big a topic, right? On the field level, yes, maybe some people were growing, getting promoted, etc. But this year we said, how do we define career paths, right? Not just the traditional career paths, because those are anyway obvious. If you're in sales, you can grow in sales. If you're in credit, you can go there, ops, etc. From our side, let's at least show a picture to people that says that you can move across. We are billing. It's on you. You decide what you want to do. We're happy if you want to come and work, the PMO's office and some other function, if you want to go to tech, if you want to go to something else. But do decide for yourself what you want to do. And this is a journey we just started. So let's see how it goes. But that's our attempt to say that careers, basically that's our attempt to say that careers are actually webs, to show it to you in a more visual way and translate it for people who would want to take the chance. I think this is just a summary, coming back to pretty much everything that you've talked about. I don't think there's anything new here. I would just say one thing, everything that we're trying to do where we're saying that, entrepreneurial generation, we need to create flexibility, we need to give them autonomy, we need to give them purpose, meaning, blah, blah, blah. From an HR perspective, the more language we use, the more complicated language we use, the honest truth is the less it's understood by the rest of the organization. And most of the times what we face is, ki, haan yaar, ye sab theek hai, but karna kya hai? What does it mean? How does it translate into my life? I think if I had to give you a singular suggestion, because all of you are very young, you will learn, experience, etc. I think the most important thing is to say that everything that we are trying to think philosophically, you want to drive change, you want to say, I want to do this. Think about your employees and how it can translate into a concrete change. Is there a process? Is there something that you're going to use to make that change happen? Because only language is not going to help. My belief is that unless your system process, something is going to get translated from your thought process, philosophy, etc. There's no point of saying that all of us are a family, let's work towards the company's goals. They will. They are anyway there to maximize their objectives, maximize their money, fulfillment, whatever it is. But if you want them to drive a certain level of ownership, drive things which are beyond their work, feel what belonged at work, you'll have to tweak something in a more real way to create that impact rather than through language. So yeah, that's what I'd like to end with. That's pretty much it from me. Happy to take any questions, feedback, thoughts, comments.
Salve.
Yes.
So you mentioned that you started with the GC goals and you have chosen people like 3 to 5%. So they will drive the company's goal and not have individual goals. So why don't you set individual goals? Because anyways the individual goals will be aligned to the organizational growth.
Yes. So this 3 to 5% of the organization is the senior most people at the company. Right? And like I said, this was done at the time we were starting the company. Many a times for function heads, such as myself, right? All of the things that you need to do are all important. But many a times, the dilemmas and the questions and the decisions that you need to make sometimes is of the nature that can maximize your own functions deliverable, or it will maximize company's eventual deliverable. So, for everybody to understand in a very concrete way that at this stage of the organization, for us to succeed as a company is far more important than individual functions should succeed. You have company level goals only, and only for that set of people. At a very junior level, those questions are not there because those decisions are taken much higher up. At the senior level, sometimes the core decisions that you take could actually maximize your functional deliverable, and it's not the wrong thing to do. Obviously, you're driving a certain function. But there are stages in a company where you would like to say that, yeah, right now, because we want to build this, start this, the company goal is far more important. And let's go with that. And you're not going to be compensated for driving your own agenda.
And how do you choose the 3 to 5%, the people?
They are the senior.
Or they are just the senior most?
They are the senior. Yes. Yes. So if you were talking about the ROE program, so in the beginning you mentioned the particular program for the women taking business role, then it is identified, then the particular process is not correct for them, and then you implemented that in the ROE. So what exactly problem you find in the regular process, and what exactly changes you made that ROE was helpful to them? So I get to some examples of that. So first of all, what takes care was that, like I said, that our first point of call was, and my ask of the analytics team specifically, our request from them was that just let's see, looking at that, do we reject more women because they're not coming up with some things that we need, etc., etc. And like I said, we realized that it's not like we're rejecting more. I mean, we did a certain percentage, X and Y were pretty much same for men and women in terms of how many applications came to us and how many passed through the funnel, right? So then we went back and said, okay, and why aren't we getting? Because it seems like nowadays there are more and more female entrepreneurs, etc. But why aren't we getting? I think some of the issues that we realized were behavior, which we are trying to address. Some of the behavioral issues are, I think, women as entrepreneurs are less, they are less risk taking in terms of specifically lending, taking loans. It's not considered great, right? To be able to take that, rather than always wondering whether it will not work. Even when you're trying to take the business sizes are such that most of them are actually first time borrowers, right? And there is a term called new to credit. Many times, most of the lenders do not lend, I mean, the bigger, large lenders don't lend to new to credit people. If you're borrowing for the first time, a business loan, a loan against property, etc. So that was a segment we try for open in terms of saying, okay, if it's new to credit, let's give it. Similarly, loan amount. Yeah, our loans were starting at a different value. We said, can they lower that value and also give out a smaller size loans? Because remember, for financial institutions, it's a slightly different kind of an industry. There are no real physical products. There isn't like this. My previous company, and I was working for PepsiCo, we used to manufacture beverages and foods. So there is something concrete, which is a product which you're exchanging, right? FS is just an exchange of money, which basically means that your product is an Excel sheet, something, right? That you think of a construct and you say this is how it's going to work. And it's a highly regulated industry. It's also an industry which, if you ask me what the lending side, my own learning has made that it's not a business about sales. It's not about saying, can I go more a core of business? It's a business of risk management. Saying that I can give out, India is a credit hungry nation. You can pretty much lend to everybody. If you go home and you'll ask people who work for you at home, right? Your maids, your cooks, they're also taking loans. And at some time, just ask them, what are their interest rates? I can guarantee that we must be taking loans at interest of at least 24-25%, if not more. It could be 30% upwards, right? So why is that? It basically happens because you price the risk. What is the risk of the money coming back? Which is why the lending institutions also have a certain set of criteria to say, who can you lend to, who will you not be able to lend to. So let's say new to credit, certain industries become far more risky, certain profiles become far more risky. So as we studied some of the female entrepreneurs, we sort of tried to open up some of that to say, let's see, we will have our own learning. So for people new to credit, smaller size loans, trying to reach out much more to them, saying that this is available, all of that we changed. Thank you. But it's still a start. Like I said, Avoli, actually, we just want to do the 1 year celebration. So hoping to build it into something much larger. It also needs a lot of partnerships. So like in the states that we operate, we're also trying to work with the government to see if there's something there where we can either, work with their databases or get some clarity from some of the government institutions to see how do we scale this.
Ma'am, just a follow-up question to the answer that you said, you mentioned that women are not willing to take risks even now. So even though you're providing the platform to them, you're giving whatever the company can. How do you change this mindset that, you can take the risk? Because there are a lot of things that are changing for sure, but this particular problem has been prevailing for a very long time. And even now, even if they have the option, they are not ready to take the risk. How can we change that?
I would say that, I wouldn't say that many women don't like to take too much risk. I think many times when women start their own businesses, etc., you have to go a lot against a lot of things that family is telling you, society, etc. There's a lot of pressure. I don't think that singularly we can sort of make that shift. What we can do, however, and what we are trying to do as, let's say, I'll give you an example of what we are trying to do, right? As a part of our CSR program, right, we are working with 80 entrepreneurs both in Bangalore and in Bombay. And these are urban entrepreneurs. So they're not like, marginalized entrepreneurs who wouldn't know, right? You're living in poor cities like Bombay and Bangalore. But we're trying to work with them to get them to increase their revenue to become credit worthy. All right, because they're not at this stages in their business itself. It has not scaled. They're small businesses. They don't know how to expand. They don't know how to, let's say, market themselves, sell the products. They don't know which markets to outreach. Or let's say they don't know how to navigate. If you're running your own business, by the way, there is a whole legal structure, statutory things, etc. So we're trying to help them with different aspects of their business so that they can scale their business and actually become credit worthy and grow. Many a times the scale itself is so small that, you're not actually eligible for formal credit in that sense. And it's like, you're just sort of running around there itself. So there is a mindset thing which is more around society itself and how we feel and how we treat women and what we believe are their capabilities with respect to running businesses, etc. Some of that I think is changing for the positive. But at the same time, I think for companies like ours, it's also an equal responsibility to say that how do we create more and more enablers, right? In terms of saying that if you are ready, then we are happy to help you grow and scale. I'll give you another example actually to your point as well. Many, actually most of the organizations, if you're a female, right, either running a business, and many times actually in home loans as well, we will always ask for a go-guarantor who's a male, right? We did away with that. We said that if Bhavya as a person individually is eligible to get this loan, why should she need a male co-applicant, right? And we did away with that. So yeah, I mean, I think different things to learn. Like I said, it's for us also it's very early. It's not like we have all the answers. And I think specifically this kind of a field, you meet many partnerships. You can't do this sort of thing completely on your own. So we're also exploring those partnerships. Yes. Building different talent pipelines that are unique. Does it get more difficult as the company or the brand scales up? There are a lot more people, a lot more decisions to make. And if we're thinking of giving everyone, the choices that they want, does it get more difficult as we have more employees? Well, I mean, scaling has its own challenges, I would say. But, I mean, in all of that, I would say, frankly, I guess one thing we've not covered today, but my own belief is there's no substitute for good leadership. I mean, you can have a lot of systems, processes, etc. Right? I think as you scale, and there are many factors we could consider and talk about, which could be systems, processes, etc. But I would say if I had to put my finger on one thing, I would say as you scale, it's very important to have layers of good leaders, not just good leadership at the top, which is what you start with. Right? You say your CEO is great, leadership team is great, etc. But as you scale, those guys are not meant to be there everywhere. They are not meant to be able to talk to everybody, enable everything. A lot of whether it is career growth, whether it's the kind of culture you want, whether it's, let's say, even something like want to build an inclusive workplace. And it's not just about men, women, men themselves. Men could come from different parts of the country and not feel included themselves. Right? So I don't think inclusion is a question of gender. Inclusion is a far larger issue in itself, and we should enable that. I think all of those topics, there's no answer to good leadership itself. Leadership which is authentic, leadership which is able to walk the talk, leadership, that is able to set what the right behavior is from the wrong behavior. I think all of that is very critical. There's no answer to that. But of course, I mean, from a career perspective, it always helps to have examples. I think while you said that it becomes more challenging, I think as our organization scales, the positive of the scaling is that you can have far many more stories to tell. There are far many more people who you've made successful, who have done various things, grown in the system. And I think there's nothing like a great story to get people to believe that this can happen, actually. Yeah. Yeah, well,
My question is related to BEI and even Google just saw in sold there be multiple case studies. There have been multiple case studies around it and can it actually sets the benchmark amongst Indian conglomerate. But given the current political scenario where that is very strong opinions regarding such initiatives, how do you maintain that spirit and have particularly in this environment the people feel that this is something that's not really appropriate for businesses when reality you're about layoffs entire piece dedicated to it. How does that the balance that?
actually, my answer will be very commonsensical, right? I mean, I think, and again, this is not something that I'm saying for day of us, who come from different parts of the country. I don't think, diversity is a topic that India needed to learn from anywhere else to start with, right? There have been so many discussions on this, and there's been so much we ourselves have experienced from the kind of cities we've come from, the people who've lived around us as neighbors, the kind of schools we've studied in, and right. So I think diversity and being inclusive has always been very core to India and Indian society, to be very honest. I think somewhere in the middle, and I myself have worked for multinational organizations. Multinationals spoke a lot about it, this whole concept of DEI, councils, global, this, that, all of that came into the fray. But if I were to go back and just look at ourselves in India, we've been fairly inclusive, we've been fairly diverse as a culture in all sorts of ways that is possible, looks, food, color, this, that, everything, right? And just our societies were so integrated all of the time. I think for us at Bodreg, it isn't very different. I mean, we believed in it, we continue to believe in it, and we will continue to live by it. And try to do the best we can in that scenario. For other organizations, I think it's a choice that they need to make. For us, I mean, it is something that we've always believed in and will continue to believe, because we do also believe that it is very commonsensical, right? I mean, for you also as a person in a woman, like I said, this whole thing is made about men, women, and all that. So many times when I was at PepsiCo, and again, a company that, believed a lot in diversity and inclusion, some of the complaints I have got early on in my career actually have not been from women, have been from men. When, we were working in sales and, India has a way of unfoiling its colorful language, specifically functions of sales and specifically in rural areas and in FMCGs, right? And I myself had examples where men, trainees, etc., have come back and said that, look, I'm not comfortable working with these guys because they're talking in this way. It wasn't women, or men have been uncomfortable with people smoking and all of that. And equally, there have been, it's not like there were no women doing that. But I'm just saying that sometimes, I mean, the gender stereotypes are not always true. And a lot of inclusion is just common sense saying that would you like to yourself feel included or not? And the same is expected out of you and behave in the same way with the other person. I think it just boils down to that. As an organization, the challenge becomes in how do you make it more institutional in terms of saying that when you're outside, right? Maybe in my house, I believe something else. Again, all of us come from different cultures. Maybe in my family, maybe in my house, I believe something else. But once you enter the doors of this company, there is a certain base level code of behavior that you're not going to break as long as you're part of this company. Maybe outside you do it, maybe can't start running Phoebe's lives. So we've done it, we'll continue to do it is what I will say. Thank you. Yes. Ma'am, what sort of challenges does the company face in maintaining a balance between maintaining the structure in the company versus giving the entrepreneurial spirit in the company, giving the enough freedom only in the culture pillars? See, there's no question that everybody has a certain job to do, which is expected for you to do. So there's no, it's like school, right? I mean, extracurriculars are not going to substitute for you not doing well in class. There are different things. I mean, you can be great in extracurriculars and there's a value to that. But at the same time, there is also a value to core curriculum and how you do in that, right? And both of those would get different outcomes for you. So I think the base level thing is it's not like, it's a chaotic world where every day you come and you discover what am I doing. There is a core job that you have which you need to deliver and perform on. Right. On top of that, if there are things that you would like to work on, etc., great. Right. But it's like, sorry, I'm going to give a very different and random example. It's not completely comparable, but just to instigate thought. Right. When you talk about compensation, right? Base salary. What is base salary? Base salary is the core value of the job, and then you build everything else on it. I mean, at work also, it's like that. You have a certain deliverable to do for which you are paid. So first of all, you need to ensure that you do that and do that bloody well. And then after that, you feel free to build on anything else. I mean, we're happy to help you with that. But it doesn't take away from what you're required to do in your whole job. Yeah? Good. Anything else? Yes.
During hiring process, during hiring process, how do we recognize that a certain candidate behavior will align with the culture of the company?
That's $1 million question. I think you only learn it with experience. It's not an easy answer, frankly. I think there are loads of tricks and tips and tricks which I think all of us learn over our career. I would say that what helps is first of all for you to understand what works in your culture. Many times I feel like when we evaluate candidates, we're looking for everything and we're looking for superheroes which don't exist, right? So I think from a cultural fitment perspective, first is that do I understand what works for me, what kind of people have work. Like, I'll give you a GC example again, right? We're very clear that people who come with too much experience, been there, done that, and been doing the same job, etc. Many times have not worked for us. That kind of person, who always knows everything that's to be done in the job. For us, the kind of people who are maybe slightly younger, for whom this is a big job, for who would like to stretch, find out what's happening, that kind works better. So when I try to look for that, or, our CEO tries to look for that, I would say, first of all, to identify your cultural markers are very important. That what does it mean? What kind of person works better for you? To evaluate, I think it's not just about the questions you ask, but the kind of things that the person is saying and what that indicates about the person. Isn't, like I said, it's $1 million question. Everybody fails. But all the people you hire, there are obviously lots of people who hit the mark, but equally there are people who don't. So I would say you keep learning it. It's not really a clear-cut straight answer. We have things like psychometrics, which I think all organizations use, so do me. And that helps to grow, but it's still something that you keep learning on. Equal, thank you. Thank you. Thank you guys so much. On behalf of Today and SKM Minus, I would like to extend a heartfelt gratitude to Ms. Bhavya Nasta for taking the time to share her valuable insights with us today. This has truly been a very, very enlightening and fun-filled session. Learning about Godrej Capital's 127-year-old legacy and its success through innovation, inclusivity and adaptability gave us deeper appreciation of how purpose-driven organizations continue, endure and thrive. What resonated deeply was how your perspective on the entrepreneurial generation, which most of us could relate to, how Gen Zs and millennials prioritize purpose and innovation over traditional job security, and how companies must adapt for costly autonomy and redefine career paths. There are examples of Pan GC, IG Ram and ROB added immense depth to this session, leaving us with insights that we can carry forward to our own journey as future need. Thank you once again, ma'am, for sharing your wisdom and experiences with such warmth. As a small token of appreciation, we would like to present Ms. Bhavya Nasta below. Momento. There are no in the comments. Thank you.
Yeah, man. Man,